June 2026, Bolzano, Italy. Behind a steel door kept at -6 degrees, scientists finish a test they have been running for years. The result sounds impossible. On the body of a man who has been dead for 5,300 years, something is alive. 4 species of yeast growing in the dark on the world's most famous corpse. 3 of them have learned to eat the disinfectant that was meant to protect him. And the man they live on is a murder victim, the oldest one on Earth, shot in the back and left on the ice with everything he owned. For 30 years, science was sure it knew how he died. Last November, that answer fell apart. This is the whole case file. You're watching Mindwired. This is the story of the Iceman, the murder, the evidence, and the parts of the case that refuse to stay closed. Chapter 1. The shortcut. September 19th, 1991. 3,200 meters up in the Tyrolean Alps, a German couple from Nuremberg leaves the marked path, looking for a faster way down. Erika Simon sees it first. The back of a head, shoulders, and a spine sticking out of the snow and ice. She and her husband Helmut assume it is a dead climber. By the couple's own account, Helmut's camera had exactly 1 frame left on the roll. He spent it on a single photograph, the first picture ever taken of what would become the most studied human being in history. They report the find at the nearest mountain refuge. The keeper calls the police in 2 countries, because nobody can say which side of the border the dead man is lying on. The next day, a gendarme attacks the ice with a pneumatic drill. It tears into the body's hip before the compressed air runs out. The weather closes in. All they bring down is a strange axe. That axe bothers people. It looks old, genuinely old. And because of it, the authorities open a criminal file on the body in the ice. Over the next 2 days, 8 separate groups climb up to see the body. Souvenirs are taken. Fragile objects are stepped on. The crime scene, and it will turn out to be one, is contaminated before anyone knows it matters. On September 23rd, a forensic doctor frees the corpse with an ice pick and a ski pole, lifts it with his bare hands into a body bag, and a helicopter carries it off the mountain. 1 day later, an archaeologist takes a single look at the axe and the leathery skin and says the words that change everything. At least 4,000 years old. A border survey follows. The body had lain 92.5 meters inside Italy, under a line that had been drawn wrong, because in 1919, the true watershed was hidden beneath the ice. Then radiocarbon dating lands like a hammer. The man is roughly 5,300 years old, the oldest natural human mummy ever found in Europe. Chapter 2. The man in the ice. He was about 45 years old, 1.60 meters tall, around 50 kilos in life. In the museum's reconstruction, he looks back at you like a neighbor. But hold that thought, because every detail of that face is an educated guess. His gear was real, and it was startling. A copper-bladed axe, the only completely preserved prehistoric axe on Earth. The blade is 99.7% pure copper. And the copper did not come from the Alps. Isotope analysis traced the ore to southern Tuscany, 500 kilometers away. Trade networks were moving metal across Europe, 5,000 years before highways. He also carried an unfinished longbow and a quiver holding 14 arrows. Only 2 of them were finished. Whatever he was preparing for, he died in the middle of it, underarmed. His clothing came from at least 5 different animals: sheep, goat, cattle, brown bear for the cap, roe deer for the quiver. What you can visit today are reconstructions, and they fill a museum room. His body kept a diary of his pain, 61 tattoos in 19 groups, most of them sitting directly over worn joints and his lower spine. Researchers believe they were treatment, not decoration. He was a walking case file even before the violence. Whipworm eggs in his gut, hardening arteries, teeth ground down by gritty flour. His DNA even carries traces of the bacterium that causes Lyme disease. And a surviving fingernail recorded 3 separate episodes of serious illness in his final 6 months. His body was already fighting something when he climbed for the last time. None of that killed him. What killed him stayed hidden inside his left shoulder for 10 more years. Through every examination, every scan, every documentary that called his death an accident of weather. Chapter 3. The Arrowhead. June 2001. Bolzano General Hospital. A radiologist named Paul Gossner is reviewing new chest x-rays of the mummy taken to check a suspected broken rib. In the left shoulder, he spots a dense little triangle, 5 times the density of bone. On a body from the Copper Age, only one material reads like that: stone. It is a flint arrowhead, about 2.5 centimeters long, buried under the left shoulder blade. 10 years of the most intense scientific attention on Earth, and everyone had missed the murder weapon. It had been missed because the wooden shaft was gone. Someone pulled the arrow out, the dying man reaching back, or his killer removing evidence. Only the stone tip stayed behind. The pathologist melted the icy glaze on the mummy's back and found the entry wound, small and unmistakable, below the left shoulder blade. On July 26, 2001, the team announced it to the world. Europe's oldest mummy became the world's oldest identified murder victim, and the very first estimate said he could have lived only a few hours after the shot. Remember that estimate. Chapter 4, a matter of minutes. 4 years later, the mummy went through a modern CT scanner, slice by slice. What came back looked like case closed. The arrow had torn the wall of the left subclavian artery, a 13mm tear in one of the body's critical vessels, with a large bleed pooled around it. The verdict, published in 2007, was brutal and simple: complete bleed out. In the words of one researcher on the team, if the artery starts bleeding, it's a matter of minutes to die. For nearly 20 years, that was the answer. Museums printed it. Documentaries repeated it. The Iceman was shot in the back and died fast, right where he fell. But the body held complications. A deep cut across his right hand, down to the bone. Wound healing dated it 3 to 8 days before death. He had been in a fight, days before someone shot him. A follow-up study concluded he was attacked at least twice. The hand wound in one violent event, the arrow and a blunt trauma to the back in another. Later, researchers even reported possible bruising on his brain. Chapter 5. The Coldest Case. In 2016, the museum's director did something unusual. She invited a working murder detective, Alexander Horn of the Munich police, to profile a killing 5,300 years old. Horn started where detectives start, the victim's final hours. Pollen in his gut had already mapped them. Down from the timberline into the valley, then back up, hard, to over 3,000 meters. Roughly 33 hours, reconstructed almost step by step. Then, the detail that anchors everything. His stomach was full. Dried ibex meat and fat, red deer, einkorn wheat. A heavy mountain meal, roughly half fat, eaten shortly before he died. In Horn's words, a man rushing to get away from someone trying to kill him does not sit down and eat a heavy meal. The Iceman felt safe. He thought it was over. Nothing was stolen. The copper axe, rare, valuable, instantly recognizable, was still lying with him. To Horn, that ruled out robbery, and it whispered something darker. The killer did not dare carry an object everyone back home would recognize. Horns read of the file. The hand wound was a fight the Iceman won, days earlier, down in the valley. The arrow was the loser's answer. Fired from behind, from a distance he put at nearly 100 feet, while the victim rested. Other researchers read politics instead. One archaeologist argued the Iceman was a leader whose time had run out, chased from his own village by rivals and finished off at altitude. One scientist even reported blood from 4 different people on his gear. On the knife, on an arrow, on his coat. He died before the work was fully published, and it has never been independently verified. Every theory agrees on one thing. Whoever released that arrow walked away clean. No weapon, no second body, no trace. The killer left exactly one piece of physical evidence on this earth, and it was inside his victim's shoulder. Chapter 6. Hours, not minutes. May 2025, a forensic team in Copenhagen rebuilds the wound in 3 dimensions from the CT data, and the numbers start to disagree with the story. The arrowhead punched a hole clean through the shoulder blade and came to rest between the ribs and the scapula. But the blood pooled around the wound measured only about 110 milliliters. 1/10 of a litre. That is not what bleeding to death in minutes looks like. The team wrote it carefully. Death from blood loss alone may not have been immediate. The trajectory surprised them too. The shot came from behind, angled slightly downward, which means the killer may have held the high ground while the Iceman stood below him, unaware. Then, November 27th, 2025, a clinical team with a practicing neurosurgeon on it corrects the wound for 5,000 years of mummification shrinkage. In a living body, that wound track runs 11 to 13 centimeters, almost all of it through muscle. And muscle closes over a wound track. Their estimate, about 1/2 litre of blood lost before the bleeding stopped itself. 10% of his blood volume. Survivable. In their words, survival for several hours after the arrow injury was likely. So what killed him? Their answer is quieter and crueler. Everything at once. The wound, plus hours of exertion, plus altitude, plus cold. A slow fade on the ice, not a switch being flipped. And his rigid right hand, they suggest, was not a fist. It was a bandaged wound. Notice the circle. The very first estimate in 2001 said hours. 2007 said minutes, and the world believed it for 2 decades. 24 years and 2 reversals later, the science came home. Hours. He sat on that ice, wounded, and he waited. Chapter 7, still alive. Which brings us back to Bolzano and the study that gave this video its title. Since 1998, the Iceman has lain in a sealed cell at -6 degrees and 99% humidity, resting on a scale that weighs him around the clock. The cell is opened rarely. Every opening is recorded. The new study reached across that entire recorded history. Soil bagged at the gully during the 1991 recovery. Stomach contents extracted in 2010 during a 9-hour thaw that yielded 149 samples. Swabs and meltwater from a 5-hour thaw in 2019. Standard incubators could not get cold enough for what the team suspected was living there, so they had a culturing device custom built to run cold, and they waited. 4 species of yeast grew. Cold-adapted glacier organisms whose closest known relatives live in Antarctica and the high Arctic. This was not lab contamination. It came with him, out of the ice. 3 of the 4 can digest phenol. That is the disinfectant sprayed on the mummy in 1991 to stop fungal growth. The chemical meant to protect him may have been quietly feeding what lives on him. And then the quiet bombshell. 1 yeast, Glaciozyma, was more abundant in the 2019 samples than in the 2010 samples, with less damage to its DNA. Between 2 openings of a sealed, sub-zero cell, it had been multiplying. Be precise about what this means. Nothing of the man himself is alive. His own cells died on that ridge 5,000 years ago. His original gut bacteria survive only as shredded fragments of ancient DNA. What lives is what the ice gave him. Passengers still riding. The senior scientist on the study put it this way. The mummy is not a static relic, but a dynamic biological system. Keeping the world's most protected corpse means monitoring the things that live on it forever. And in the strangest coda in this entire file, the team coaxed yeast recovered from his gut into fermenting sourdough. The lead author's verdict, quote, "We made some really good dough with it." Chapter 8, who he was all along. Because here is the unsettling part. Even his face has been overturned. The famous museum figure, pale skin, a full head of hair, wiry beard, was built on his first genome, sequenced in 2012. In 2023, a cleaner genome showed that first sequence had been contaminated with modern DNA. The real Iceman had dark skin, the darkest recorded for any European of his time. Dark eyes and a balding head. More than 92% of his ancestry traces to early farmers from Anatolia. And when researchers sequenced 47 of his prehistoric neighbours, they found his community shared that ancestry. Genetically, he fit right in. Except for 2 threads. His father's genetic line matches none of the 47 neighbours sampled, and his mother's line has never been found in any population on Earth, ancient or modern. Both threads, so far, end with him. The tabloids, meanwhile, gave him a curse. 7 deaths among people who touched the case. The archaeologist who led the first investigation called it a load of rubbish and media hype, and he was right. Hundreds of people have handled the Iceman. Time passes. People die. But one story from that list deserves better than a tabloid. Helmut Simon, who found the Iceman, died in a mountain blizzard in 2004 on a different peak, 200 kilometers away. He was missing for 8 days before searchers found him in the snow. He never lived to see the settlement his family had fought for. Here is what stays with me. We aimed every machine we have at this man. CT scanners, gene sequencers, custom cold incubators. And he answered almost every question, except the one a neighbour could have answered in a sentence. Who wanted him dead? The killer's name melted away 5,000 years before anyone thought to ask. The arrowhead in his shoulder is the only testimony left, and it will never say more than it already has. And the man himself lies in the dark at -6 degrees, still teaching, still being corrected, while the only living things he has left, the ones the ice gave him, quietly multiply in the cold. If the oldest cold case on Earth got under your skin, wait until you see the body still on Mount Everest and the man the whole world called by the wrong name for 30 years. That full story is on your screen right now. Subscribe to Mindwired. If any of this messed with your head a little, well, that's exactly the point. And it only happens because people like you keep showing up. And
hit subscribe right now, Flint. It costs you nothing, and it's the entire reason Mindwired keeps making videos like this. Subscribe.